All right, welcome to EV Obsession, the latest show from Clean Technica. I'm your host, Joe Boris, here with Clean Technica CEO Zachary Shahan. And, there's a lot to talk about this week in the world of EVs. We're going to talk a little bit about Tesla, some of the progress they're making out in California and Texas. We're going to talk about Fisker. We'll talk about the new GMC Hummer Overland camper. And, we'll talk a little bit about Mazda and some of the struggles that they're having. But before we do any of that, Zach, welcome to the show.
Yeah, so since this is episode one, we just want to explain it a little bit further and just give you behind the scenes look at what we're doing here. So, of course, we publish 15 or so stories a day on cleantechnica.com. A lot of people, though, just like to get their news on YouTube or on podcasts. I follow tennis stuff. I get almost all of it from YouTube, listening in the background or while doing things like eating or
living life as a human mammal on Earth.
At the pickup line. But the point is that this is where people are getting a lot of news, and we should have more of our news coverage on there. We've tried different things in the past, but we want to try this format of Joe and I discussing what's hottest in the EV world on this EV Obsession show on Clean Technica. And yeah, I think we're committed to it because we have to be, and we love the idea. But it's going to take time to build it up and to basically sharpen our tools here. So,
and the other thing too is, now it's on the calendar. So now we have to do it because it's on the calendar and we obey the calendar.
And I'm not saying it's like, oh, we have to do this. We love this idea. We really love this idea. We just know it takes time to build audience, to build expertise in the medium that we're using.
Sure.
So yeah, that's the idea. We love this, and we're going to do it twice a week.
Yes. And you should love it and listen to it too, I think is what we're getting.
Yeah. And if you love it enough and like us enough and we get enough following, we can, make it a daily thing eventually. So that's the goal. A daily EV news show where we yell at each other, like, on your favorite sports or politics shows where people get on a camera and yell at each other and disagree. So
I think this is a great way to kick off, Trump surrendering in Georgia and the new modern era of American politics. How many times do you think these racist white supremacists are going to have to surrender in Georgia before they get the message?
This is a different topic. We're not doing a politics show, but we did have a big laugh because right before starting the recording, I ran into Trump's mugshot. So it is a funny time, but
it's a funny
yes. let's jump into the EV news. I think we'll start with the biggie.
I think the biggest news, whenever you're talking about EVs and electric vehicles, I think Tesla takes center stage because regardless of what you think of Elon Musk, the reality is that we are all sitting here having this conversation about electric vehicles in 2023 because of Tesla, right? And the Cybertruck is arguably the reason that GM and Ford and everybody else got on the ball with their Silverados and F-150 Lightning. And we've seen a lot of what have been said to be pre-production pictures of production ready, beta models of the Cybertruck come out, which is, it obviously has a very striking stainless steel appearance. But there's been a couple of other developments with Tesla. Texas finally approved, gave them the opportunity to do these virtual power plants using the Tesla batteries and solar power as well. And Tesla also got approval to build their drive-in diner, which is, this is like a 50 style diner where you pull up your Tesla, you plug it in, you go inside, and you have some eggs and cheese, and you got Mabel back there pouring the coffee, and it's a thing.
This is so appropriate for our first episode since you have this Pizza Hut background, but also like this is something I was like, oh man, that was such a great fun idea they had hyped up or Elon had hyped up, and it's never coming, and now it's finally. I was like, oh, it is here. Oh, we're gonna get it. This is exciting. So this is one of the I know it's a simple thing, but it's one of the Tesla announcements from the past couple of years. I think it's really something new and exciting. So
but I think it speaks to this idea that one of the criticisms that I often have of Elon and Tesla is that they make promises and they make announcements of things that and I would say, because I'm a cynic and I'm emotional, that they make promises that never happen. So
it's really just Elon on Twitter.
It's really just it's not even like Twitter anymore. It's X.
I'm not doing it. I call it Twitter. I'm sorry. It's Twitter.
All right.
X is a letter. Like,
It's
and
a
it's a
thing.
letter that's known for various things already. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's Twitter, and like
It's so he's X'd about it several times.
yes, and that's but I do want to clarify. Has he or anyone said that we should call that Xing now? Because I know people are calling it that, but they're like, oh, we have to call it Xing. No, it's still tweeting.
So
And it's
so
still
you
Twitter in the
tweet on
URL.
X?
No, I tweet on Twitter, but I'm saying even people who call it X should be still calling it tweeting. They're tweeting on X.
They're tweeting on X. Okay. I hate that. So anyway,
Okay,
but I
let's
also
just
don't
drop
want to
it.
be threading on threads. So
No.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
All
But
right.
every time that they deliver on one of these, even if they deliver late, it adds credibility to the next thing that they say, right?
Yep.
So, okay, 2021, you said you were going to do this diner. It seemed like nonsense, but like, okay, so 2024, we're going to get a diner. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Whether that means that we are actually going to get robo taxis that pay for themselves while we sleep, I don't know, but we
Yeah.
certainly seem to be going in that direction.
Well, Tesla is famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, for being late but delivering what it said it would deliver in many cases. This was the case for years. In fact, if you look at long-term forecasts, Tesla was on time in 2020 for what it had forecasted like a decade before. So it was actually even on time and delivered and over-delivered. But that was all about just producing cars, selling their sales forecasts. When it got to more complicated stuff, a little bit more complicated, like even just putting solar on all the superchargers or some of the solar glass plans or other solar plans, full self-driving. Of course, there was the LA to New York City self-driving road trip that was supposed to happen like 5 years ago.
I forgot about that.
That's
The
the biggest one
electric,
to me. It's like,
yeah,
oh,
the
we're going to do
autonomous
this next year.
cannonball.
In like 2017, it's like, oh, we're going to do one next year, and or something like that. And so I think, I don't want to get too long, but I think Elon has some obvious strengths and some obvious weaknesses. And one of his obvious strengths is he's stubborn as heck at doing what he wants to do and making it happen. Like, I mean, this is something even his brother and mom talked about since he was a kid. Like, if he says he's gonna do, like, he had this story of like, oh, he wanted to go to his friend's house and wasn't allowed to go, so he walked for like 2 hours to his friend's house. But I think that's what made Tesla survive. I think that's what made Tesla succeed when everyone was like, oh, he can't do this. The chances of him succeeding here are ridiculous. Even he thought so, but he was like so stubborn. He's like, I'm going to do it. I think it's a little different with full self-driving. You can't just will it into existence. It's very complicated. And we'll talk about that in other episodes for sure, because that's a whole can of worms. But with something like a diner, solar and supercharger, this should come about eventually. And the diner idea is something I love. I just love the idea of making EV charging fun and EVs fun. And there's a lot of ways you can do that creatively, and this is one of them. EV charging stations, in my opinion, should be massive destination attraction, like massive attractions. Like, they should be stores, fun places for like with little kiddie rides or fun entertainment facilities. They should, like, big EV charging hubs should be places you want to go anyway. And hey, isn't it convenient that you can charge 1 million EVs there because everyone wants to go there? But anyway, okay, that's it. I'm done with that. We'll get to the Cybertruck in a second, but I'll let you talk more about the diner since you're in a diner.
Pizza Hut's not quite a diner, but I appreciate that. I agree with you. I think this is very reminiscent of like what Subway announced about this time last year, that they were going to start adding high speed charging to their subway stations on the highways that were highway adjacent. And I really like that idea because you plug in to like, a 300 watt or 350 watt or kilowatt charger. And by the time you go into a Subway, you order your sandwich, they make the thing, you pay for it, you get your drink. Even if you don't sit down and eat it there, which of course most people would, because a sub is not really road food, right? It gets a little messy. Yeah, a little messy. So even if you don't eat it there, just the process of getting the food takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And if you're on a high speed charger, you're not necessarily looking to put it to 100% or even 80%. You're just looking for enough charge to get you through today or tomorrow. And if you're driving in an urban environment, you're mainly using your car to get back and forth to work. That might be enough for several days of driving.
Yep, let's move to the Cybertruck. So yeah, the Cybertruck is Tesla's or Elon's boldest idea for a vehicle so far. The Model X was sort of that for a while, and the Model X had great trouble ramping up production. Not just because the Falcon Wing doors, but because the windshield was the largest ever produced in a production vehicle, and they had trouble with the supply for that. They had various issues just getting it to work well. So it was a bit of a nightmare. It possibly could have tanked Tesla, but they pushed through it. And Elon, I think, has said that he probably would not have done it again if he went in retrospect.
Yeah.
But the Cybertruck is like exponentially, or we can say an order of magnitude, using one of Elon's favorite phrases, more different, or I would say more extreme, more different. And there's two potential reasons why it's been taken so long to get to production. One is what Tesla has said, which is that they only have so many batteries, and they have those going into the Model 3 and Model Y. So there's no point in introducing a new model when they don't have enough batteries for the 3 and the Y. And that's the same explanation for the semi-truck. I'm not sure how much I believe that, especially given that they've had to pull a lot of demand levers in recent times to keep sales up at the level they want.
Yeah.
But secondly is, potentially the Cybertruck is more complicated than foreseen. Wow.
Well, I think the idea, and let me rephrase this. I know, because I've talked to some people within Tesla that I can't out them, but I know that the original intent was that we can do a flat panel vehicle and it'll be infinitely simpler to get that out on the market, because having learned the lesson of the giant windshield, having learned the lesson of all these complex curves and manufacturing techniques, that this could be like, if people accept this flat panel polygon vehicle, then we can have polygon sedans and everything else, and it'll be that much faster and simpler to do. But what wasn't really understood by the group that was doing it at the time, or Elon, depending on who you believe, is that using stainless steel, especially flat panel stainless steel, is very, very difficult. And the commitment to stainless steel was made so strongly and so early on that they've had to actually come up with new manufacturing techniques and new metallurgy to be able to make this work the way that it is. Now, if it's successful, we might see later similar looking vehicles that are made out of more traditional sheet steel that can be painted and things like this, and not the stainless. But if what they are able to accomplish here with the stainless steel really works, the next application where you're going to see this is going to be on things like SpaceX, on things that are going up into space, because stainless steel, especially the stainless steel type that they're using on the Cybertruck, has some really weird properties, in the sense that when it gets very, very cold, like when you're in the vacuum of space, it doesn't become brittle. It doesn't get stress cracks. And the way that they are making this work, if you look at this project, you could almost write all of it off as R&D for SpaceX, because they're using that stainless steel material there. I'm not sure that Tesla shareholders want to be subsidizing SpaceX R&D, but maybe they get a cool truck out of it and everybody's happy.
Yeah, probably a lot of crossover fans do, but others not so happy maybe. But yeah, I think there's two. Well, when it came out as a discussion, as an idea, as a product, in the comment threads, there's all kinds of experts. You don't know if someone is an armchair expert or a real expert, but I did see some people say, like, they seem to know what they were talking about. And they're like, yeah, automakers have looked at this and thought this is not practical. Like, right. This is just with the gigacasting, with the steel, both factors. And other people have their explanation why it does make sense. I think there's two possible scenarios. One is it's never going to really make sense for a mass-produced vehicle, and the Cybertruck will be a niche vehicle that will probably cost a lot more than initially presented.
You mean I won't get a $40,000 Cybertruck?
Yeah, that price disappeared a long time ago. And the second option is, yes, there's a fundamental reason why this would be a simpler, lower cost solution for mass-produced trucks. And it's just really hard to get there because you have to develop these supply chains, develop these new manufacturing processes. You have to push through all of this difficulty to do it. And no traditional automaker is going to do that because they just don't have that. They're not that extreme with, you know, new ideas and pushing through all those barriers. Their R&D shops are not production vehicles that that 500,000 people are going to buy. You know, the R&D so it's just a different thing. So it's possible it becomes a standard that is then used, and there's a cybercar and everything. I don't really have a strong opinion on it because I don't technically know enough about why it would work or wouldn't work. I lean toward thinking it's going to end up more of a niche product. And while a lot of people are like, this is going to be Tesla's highest selling vehicle ever, Elon has never said that. His goal was like 150,000 a year, and
Even
like
that seems high.
And like 500,000 for the Model Y, or even more, up to 1 million for the Model Y. So it's not even close to what Tesla and Elon expect for the Model 3 and Model Y. But we'll see. Is it going to be 150,000? Is it going to be 350,000? Is it going to be 30,000 a year? So I don't know. But right now, they're you know, people are sort of excited about these production vehicles that are getting out, but it's also like this stage tells you nothing. Like the idea that, okay, they're ready to start producing them and delivering them at the end of the year, because they sort of have to be by now, because it's taken way too long. And
it's taken
does
4
that mean
years.
they're going to be mass produced in a year? No, we have no clue. There's production hell and all that, which, you know, Elon has been surprised by multiple times. And in this case, again, I feel like there's probably overly optimistic about how long it will take to get to mass production. But that's the end of my take on the Cybertruck. I do think it's a very interesting vehicle. I'm not thrilled with the fact that it's a huge Escalade competitor, basically, and it's more of a competitor to the Cadillac Escalade than a normal pickup truck in some ways.
Oh, I agree with that. I agree with that completely. And not only that, it's going to attract the people who are going to buy this are not people who are, you know, what I would say like the Hummer audience that I see here in Chicago. Like there's a couple Catholic schools nearby, and the only places I have ever seen a Hummer in the wild is driven by a big hair blonde woman dropping off her kids at the Catholic school. That's the only people I've ever seen behind the wheel of a new Hummer EV. I'm not saying there's not other kinds of buyers. I'm just saying that's who I see buying these things. I don't think that you are going to get suburban Hummer Barbie into a Cybertruck. I don't see that at all. But what you will see is you're going to see some of these Jeep bros, the guys with like the angry, you know, eyebrows over the Jeep headlights. You're going to see some of those guys. You're going to see some of the Silverado guys that have them lifted up and they're running on, you know, 40-inch ATs. Those guys might get into the Cybertruck. And funny enough, our next topic, the Fisker Ocean. Fisker came out with a Fisker Ocean Earthcruiser.
Before we get there,
I think those guys would compete with the Cybertruck.
Yeah, before we get there, though, what's your thought on the production ramp up for the Cybertruck?
Man, I think that what has happened with the Ford Lightning, and when I say that, what I mean is that Ford initially believed that the high demand, the meatiest part of the bell curve of demand for the Lightning was going to be the more expensive kind of King Ranch XLT Lariat versions of the truck. And all of those trucks, and I say all of them, I mean all of them. I know that's not a hyperbole thing. These $120,000 Lightnings are sitting on dealer lots right now and positively rotting because people are not buying them. But they cannot keep the work trucks. They cannot keep the entry level trucks, the entry versions of those trucks in stock. And the same is true for the Ford Maverick. The same is true for the Ford Bronco. That high end pickup truck buyer, that high end market of people that are buying these trucks instead of a Mercedes or instead of a BMW, they are not responding to these as EVs. That might be because the Ford brand and the kind of people that branding attracts, that might
100%.
be, yeah,
these are not people who are buying Accords before. These are people who are buying souped up, expensive, polluting trucks to drive to Publix. And I think that was a mystery. I mean, that might change in the future. Those people might want the high-end EV electric truck, but they weren't the ones who want the electric truck right off the bat. And I think that's really, I think it's good because we want to sell a ton of the cheaper ones. We don't
Right.
want to sell a sort of lot or small number of the expensive ones. So I think it's
Yeah.
good, but yeah, it is a bit of a challenge, right?
It was a misread by Ford. And I think you said that exactly right. That's exactly what it is. I think that there was a cabal, a group within Ford, and then maybe some of the other legacy auto brands that looked at Tesla and said, people are buying these because they're electric and they're going to buy ours because ours are electric. And it's like, no, the Tesla brand means something, just like the Ford brand means something. And the type of people that the Ford brand speaks to are a different type of person than the Tesla brand. And the two, maybe you'll get some crossover. Maybe somebody doesn't want to wait for the Model Y, they'll get a Mach-E. Maybe you have someone who has some past love or reverence for the Mustang brand, like I do. I had a Fox body. I had actually two Fox body Mustangs, and I'm much more likely to buy a Mach-E, just
Yeah, I
based
think
on my love for Mustang. But
no, the
it's a different
Mustang,
guy.
the Mustang Mach-E competing with the Model Y is much more sensible to me. The Ford F-150 Lightning and the Cybertruck are on different planets, I think. So,
Yeah, I
but
agree.
what's your thought on the ramp up then for the Cybertruck? Because you started with that issue, and I think you're getting to the price issue on the Cybertruck, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they can make it for the type of pricing that they originally projected. I think the kind of pricing that they're going to need to do to make any kind of business case for it, even if it's a loss leader at $100,000+, I don't believe the market is there. Um, but Tesla's proved me wrong every single time. I'm eventually going to, start getting sick of losing every time I bet against Tesla, but it's not going to be today.
But basically, you're not confident they're going to get mass production up in a year. Do you
No,
think
and
there's
I
going to
don't think
be
they're going to sell 30,000 a year of these things ever. Maybe the first year, but I think if they build this thing for 5 years and they average it out, it's going to be about 12,000 a year. It'll be fewer than the Model S.
We'll move to the Fisker, but I want to first highlight one thing that drives me nuts. So everybody highlights how many reservations there are for the Cybertruck. I had like 8 or 10 reservations for the Cybertruck because at the time they said if you reserve the Cybertruck with full self-driving, you lock in today's full self-driving price,
Right.
which was like $6,000. Now it's like $15,000. So I'm not. I have had full self-driving for on my car since, I mean, for the 4 years I've owned my car. I'm not bullish on what they're doing with full self-driving, but I kept those reservations until like last week because I was like, well, if it ends up they do solve the problem, I sure want to have that locked in price and get these with full self-driving and try to do a side business here,
Yeah.
But I dropped it. I'm like, it's enough. They're going into production. Full self-driving is not anywhere close, in my opinion. I'm getting my $100 back on each of these. And I kept one just like, okay, we'll see. But everyone highlights how many reservations, like it's like bonkers how many reservations are for this truck. Yeah, because people were doing that. The same thing I did. I know a lot of Tesla people are doing. This is a common thing. People reserve like 10 trucks with the expectation of having a robotaxi fleet when they go into production and having to pay $6,000 for full self-driving instead of 30,000. It's so I think the reservation number is bonkers. It was only $100 and you get it back whenever you want. It wasn't like 1,000. Wasn't non-refundable. So I really hate the discussion about. But look how many reservations there are because I don't
It's
buy the
meaningless.
reservation.
It's
Yeah,
totally
but
meaningless.
let's
Yeah.
move. Do the segue.
Fair enough. Well, it's not the Segway, it's the Fisker. And, it's so funny that like 15 years later, we're still talking about Henrik Fisker and Elon Musk, right? But, Fisker just will not go away. He's like the herpes of the EV world, where like he shows up every 6 months with some kind of news and then like vanishes for a while. But the news he's got today, he's got his Fisker Ocean that's finally coming into production. This is an SUV, electric SUV that's being manufactured by Magna Steyr. That's very well known as an automotive supplier, as a tier one supplier. They're basically building this car. It's essentially a Magna vehicle that's been designed and marketed by Fisker. And he's about to bring this thing into production, and what he showed off to kind of hype it up again, remind people that it exists, is an off-road version of this thing called the Force. It's got like 1980s style, like Marty McFly off-road Toyota pre-runner kind of graphics. It's got the tow hooks. It's got 33-inch tires. It's got the the basket on the roof, and it looks very off-roady. It looks if you're old enough to remember like the Tyco 9.6V RC off-road car commercials that would come on Saturday morning cartoons, it looks very much like that. I don't actually think it's probably worth a damn off-road, but it certainly looks cool. And let's face it, 99.9% of these luxury SUVs, Range Rovers, even Jeep Grand Cherokees that you see are never going to go off-road. Maybe they'll brave the soccer field, the driveway at the soccer field once every 2 or 3 Saturdays. But, I think it's certainly got the look, and, it did its job. We're here talking about it. And I'm surprised, frankly, that not only that the Fisker Ocean made it to production, but the first couple of people that are driving these things, some of them are getting into customer hands and into the hands of reviewers. They seem to have pretty positive reviews. I'm frankly shocked because I remember how bad the original Fisker Karmas were.
Yeah, well, Fisker is a designer, and he's a wonderful designer. He designs beautiful vehicles. Like he's really
without
good.
question. Right.
He's not really I'm necessarily equipped to be a CEO of a car company or anything like that, but he's definitely a great designer. I think this vehicle's dead in the water, personally. It doesn't match the Fisker brand to me. It's like it seems like a reach, and it's reaching into this territory like the upper class, the higher end Ford F-150 Lightning, like the Rivian territory. And I'm like, well, who's gonna want that instead of a Rivian, instead of a Cybertruck, instead of a Ford F-150 Lightning? Like all of these brands are more established, more popular, and they have their vehicles fit their like brand a bit. Like this doesn't fit the Fisker brand to me, which is like, high end like Miami luxury car, or like beautiful, competitor to a Maserati, whatever.
So we agree that it's ugly.
Well, I just don't see it like, yeah, I mean, it seems like like a kind of version of a Range Rover. I just don't really see where the market is for this. And it seems outside of Fisker's territory, but we'll see. I mean, but I am happy that Fisker's alive and the people are getting the Ocean, and there's another brand on the market. I was a little bit off. I thought the Rivian design was so weird and quirky with those headlights that it would be dead in the water when it was introduced. And immediately there was all this fandom around it. And I was like, am I crazy? This looks like a truck that just like Seattle tech guys would buy. But it's been popular since the introduction, and I'm seeing them all over the place now. And I think so. I'm not the best judge of what kind of truck or large SUV people want, but I just feel like someone who would theoretically be in the market for this Fisker is more in the market for the Rivian, and they would get the Rivian. And
the Rivian
I don't know.
So big though. It's a lot bigger than this thing. Like this is really where I look at this is it looks like I feel like its competitor would be the Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe or like an electric Cherokee, or maybe, the Mercedes, the little one, the little electric Mercedes, what do they call it? The EQB or something. Mercedes needs to do something about the names, by the way. This EQ thing is just trash. It's confusing. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody knows what the heck car you're talking about. Is it an S class? Is it an EQS? I don't know. I don't care. It just drives me absolutely insane. I don't know how they're going to fix it, but I don't care. I've already lost interest. But I think that this is a competitor for something like that. And it's just a smaller vehicle. I don't know who's buying this thing. I don't know who would be the competitor. It would be somebody who's looking at a BMW X5, or somebody's looking at, like I said, the Mercedes Benz. And you just have to be the kind of person who like lives in a neighborhood fully populated by, mid-level luxury vehicles, because this is not a Bentley or a Rolls Royce kind of thing. It's a much less expensive entry point, and frankly, the quality's not there. But it just looks like your target customer is someone who is positively obsessed with what the neighbors have in their driveway and has to have something different so that they can feel like they're, part of some like middle management counterculture. And I just don't get it. It's not me. It doesn't speak to me at all. And, based on that, they'll probably sell 2 or 3 million of the things. Who the hell knows?
Yeah, well, I do see quite a few of those plug-in hybrid Jeep 4XEs around here. If
Yeah,
that's the
there's a
competitor,
ton of those.
yeah, if they're competing with that and they can find the buyers, yeah, maybe. But I think it's outside their
Yeah.
wheelhouse. Yep. So let's move on. Is GM next?
Well, yeah. So the next going from that, it's really kind of blowing my mind how popular this off-roading overland kind of post-apocalyptic vehicle thing is, right? Because you could argue that the Cybertruck fits that mold. You could say that this Fisker Force definitely does. And then the GMC Hummer, which is like the granddaddy of all post-apocalyptic vehicles, now they have an EV, and not only that, but now they've brought out a essentially a bedline camper that goes into the back of the GMC Hummer. It's got a pop-up, rooftop sleeper. It's got a little, a little kitchenette there. It's a nice setup. You can go anywhere in the world. But what blows my mind is like, is somebody spending $200,000 on a vehicle like this to go and, work from their laptop in Yosemite? Like, who is buying this? What is the purpose of this thing?
I'm speechless. No, no, I
I
think you
mean,
nailed it.
it's
I don't
that's
have much
it.
to
What do
add.
you say?
I think you nailed it. I think I hadn't thought about that, but that this appeal for the off-road vehicle has really ballooned. Like I think it's from COVID times on, maybe. People were like realizing, hey, I can work and live off the grid. More like, oh, I got to stay away from people. They're deadly. Uh, I don't know,
Yeah. Well, I
but
think there's a lot of
and then
zombie
apocalyptic.
television. Yeah.
Apocalyptic. I mean, look at what's happening. Like, geez, seriously. Like, Hawaii is on fire. Every
Everything's on fire right now.
yeah, everything's on fire. Everything's like as hot as an oven inside of an oven.
Oh, it was
Yeah, so
106 degrees in Chicago yesterday. 106 degrees. I was
it's
so mad. I was so upset. I was talking to you and I have a mutual friend, Chris Tomorrow. I don't know if you keep in touch
yeah.
with him or not.
Chris. No, I don't, but I love Chris. Yeah.
I love Chris. And we were talking. I was telling him how hot it was. He's like, geez, Joe, your underpants must be a federally protected wetlands by now. And I was like,
That's
yes, it's
it's been
such a
years.
Chris line.
It's been years since I talked to him, and that was such a good impression. Well, I guess maybe I don't know, but it sounded to
No,
me like
that's exactly right. It's
yeah.
like, Joe, that's
But yeah,
it's so hot over. It's 68 degrees here.
yeah, no, but I think one thing you're highlighting with this is it's like a really sort of cool web vehicle, internet vehicle with very limited probably sales, limited market. And that seems to be what GM's sort of doing in general. I know someone who's really excited about the electric Cadillac Escalade, the 2025 Cadillac Escalade IQ that's coming in late 2024 starts from 130,000. The vehicle shown 175,000. It's like you see what they're going for. Like, oh, look at these big, awesome electric halo vehicles. Like we're EV leaders, but you're like, well, like 10 people are going to buy that because it's super expensive and it's a GM vehicle. Maybe the Escalade. I mean, I don't know. The Escalade has a much bigger market now than it did 20 years ago when it was like,
Yeah.
so it's the market for the Escalade is significant, and there's a surprisingly large number of people who can afford one in my in where I drive in Florida. So I don't know. Maybe the electric Escalade will, but it's never going to be mass market. It's too it's
No, but I think it's an
this
economy of
off-roader.
scale, right? Like you're trying to build up these ultra, which I think Tesla did the same thing. You're trying to
Yeah,
learn your
yeah.
lessons on the high end and make your margins and then kind of go low end.
And
And
they're trying to be a brand of desire for EVs.
a
And
brand of desire.
I get that. They want to be like, oh, when I'm finally going to get an EV, I know GM makes the best EVs, the coolest, the most luxurious. Sure, I'll get a
Do you
$50,000 one.
believe that? Do you believe that there's anybody of our generation, anybody on the planet right now under the age of 50 who says, man, GM Cadillac is really making the hottest EVs right now?
Yeah, I'm not bullish on GM.
Zero. The number of people under the age of 50 right now who would even suggest that Cadillac is a premium brand, the likes of Rolls-Royce or even BMW, Mercedes, I think is zero. It's nice. Cadillacs are nice cars. They're like, but I put them with like Acuras. They're like a nice Chevy, just like an Acura is a nice Honda. But is it a Bentley? Is it a Rolls? No.
Yeah, so I mean they've got
The Celestique.
the Hummer EV Earthcruiser
Oh, but
overland.
they've got the $300,000 handmade Celestique also. Don't forget about
Oh,
that
the
thing.
Celestique, yeah, the Celestique as well, which
Now,
I saw a
Zachary,
lot
would
of
you
ads
rather have a house or a Celestique?
for. Yeah. Well, I
And
guess it,
before you answer, you can live in your car, but you can't drag race your house.
yeah. It's really a tough question, Joe. I don't know. You really
I don't think
stumped
I'm
this
qualified
one.
to answer this.
Very difficult. This is like the old debate, who's better. Well, I'm not going to get into sports. Yeah, let's just
We're gonna get into like we'll talk about tennis,
uh
boxing, and Formula One racing, and like all four listeners are gonna go, "What?
I was going to go to soccer and or basketball, you know,
This is America, son."
but I don't
No, we
want
don't know any soccer players.
to open those cans.
We know Mr. Posh Spice. That's about it.
Let's just be honest. These GM is still in its own sort of world with EVs, and we're going to see what happens.
I think, and I'll take a step back from this. I think what GM is doing with Honda and being a supplier of Ultium technology to Honda and eventually to Acura and possibly now to Toyota, to Infinity, to some other people. I think that is potentially very clever. And we'll see. I am bullish on
Yeah.
Mary Barra. I think she's doing what she can, but this is a really big Titanic sized cruise ship. And those are really hard to steer and turn. And
Let's just say maybe their captive market is really a tough market for EVs, and this is why they struggle so much with the vehicles. But I, you know, there's I don't want to say the word leader because all the people who are like want to trash Biden and Mary Barra for saying they're leading in EVs. But the fact of the matter is they were a leader in EVs from the Chevy Volt on.
yeah,
And the Chevy Bolt as well. Like it was the first cheapish mass market sort of. It didn't end up being mass market, but cheapish EV with more than 200 miles range.
And I think it was much more practical than the Leaf. I think the Leaf has been around now since 2011, but it always had its weird charging protocol. It was always an efficiency play, which has never played well in the United States. It's always been a little bit goofy looking. It doesn't look like the other Nissans. It's always kind of been its own thing. And I think that
and
ultimately hurt it.
and in Europe, the Zoe was actually the first. In the US, the
Yep.
Bolt was the first. The Zoe was the first to be like a long range, affordable-ish car and did really well there in a market where they appreciate that more. In the US, the Bolt, the Model 3 was coming and it just demolished the Bolt, and the Bolt never had a chance. But as far as under the hood, like GM has done pretty well, and I completely agree. They have really something going on with the Ultium platform and helping the laggards, the big laggards, get into EVs, and that might really be a great avenue forward for them. But yeah, let's move on from GM.
Well, I want to say one last thing before we move on from GM. I'm going to say a word to you because you said something really, really smart and really clever.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
Yeah. Hang on. You said something really smart there that I don't want people to miss. What you said was that GM's captive customer base may just be one that's especially hard to crack with EVs. And I agree with you. However, this is exactly why branding exists, because different brands, even though they may be mechanically similar or mechanically identical, attract different consumers who are willing to pay a different price. That's the reason an Audi A4 costs more than a Volkswagen Jetta. It's the reason why an Audi TT commands a higher price than a VW New Beetle. They're the same vehicle, but the branding and the style and the look attract someone who's willing to pay that much more. If you look at GM's history, GM owns the intellectual property, the branding rights, all the trademarks, and they have the heritage, they have the ability tomorrow to flip the switch and relaunch Saturn as an all EV forward looking brand. And I think a lot of people, tens of thousands of people in this country, would get really, really excited about Saturn coming back and coming back as an EV brand, which is the original EV brand that sold the EV1 all those many, many years ago.
That's a big, bold idea. I want to be careful because I feel like Steve Hanley might be like jumping out of his shoes right now with excitement over
He's
this.
not even wearing pants right now.
Yeah.
He heard the word Saturn. He's fully nude, greased up in margarine,
Jumping
down
around
the
pickleball
street.
court.
That's it.
Yes.
You know he's
But,
playing pickleball right now. Steve Hanley, Steve, I love you. I know you're playing pickleball right now, buddy. I know it's happening.
But then there's a big crossover in the EV fan world and space fan world. So just the name Saturn also is good. But back to their captive audience, just no matter what the price range, I just think there's a more conservative audience. And you talked earlier about the Ford F-150, the higher end Ford F-150 Lightning having trouble selling. And that's maybe what even gave me the idea to say that about GM. Like even at the high end or the low end, like they're just more conservative buyers and people, and it's harder to break through with a new drivetrain, I think, than even Ford customers. But I don't know.
I think ultimately you're probably right, because if you look at the Corvette, they're still running a Chevy small block with roots all the way back to 1953. And how dare you suggest
the oldest guys in Florida are the ones driving the Corvettes around.
You know what? Should I get a Corvette? Just forget about it. Look, I'm in the right demographic, you know, like
no,
I'm saying older.
Are you kidding? I said the oldest guys in Florida. I'm not joking. When you see a Corvette on the road in Florida here, the guy's got white hair, and
but that's everywhere. That's everywhere.
The
average age of a Corvette buyer is 68.
Yeah, no. Okay, let's move to the next.
Well, I want to skip this because we're talking about the complexity of marketing and the complexity of brand narratives and things like that. And I want to talk about Mazda. I want to skip ahead to the Mazda hybrid. Mazda is, and I think rightly so, obsessed with this idea of the rotary engine and being able to put it to use as a range extender. And they need to do something, right? Because they need to do something to be a market differentiator. There has to be a reason to go buy a Mazda CX-5 when you could buy a Honda CR-V or a Toyota RAV4 or a Ford Bronco or whatever else. You have to have some reason to go look at it. And it can't just be that you saw a Miata commercial and said zoom, zoom once 25 years ago. You have to have something there that's drawing you in. So the idea that they can have a unique powertrain and have something that could really be a market differentiator. I understand why that's attractive to Mazda. I understand why they want to keep putting that forward, but they don't seem to be able to get this right. The MX-30, which was their EV that came out, that they did as a compliance car. I had one for a little while to drive around Chicago, and it was great fun. But when you opened the hood, there was a big gaping hole where you knew a range extender was supposed to go. And they can't seem to get this right. And I don't understand it. BMW in their i3, and even the i8, they had the presence of mind to go get a little tiny single cylinder or two cylinder Kymco motorcycle engine, put it in there. Other range extenders have been successful with, small displacement engines. I don't understand why Mazda won't just go that route. Why are they so completely obsessed with burning millions and millions of dollars on a rotary engine that's never going to pass emissions?
I freaking love this. I love this show. I think we're nailing it, dude. I think this is
I think we're doing such a great job. And I'm not editing this out. People are going to hear that we're excited about it.
I'm publicly patting ourselves on the back. I started off a little bit like, oh, we don't know, this is new, it's gonna be growing pains, but I love the idea of the show. I love what we're doing, the conversation we're having. And I've got over a decade of experience covering professionally EVs. You've got decades of experience in this space. There's a lot there to discuss, and I think this format is really pulling a lot more out than we than we've had in the past in other formats. So I'm really excited about this.
You came up with the name. It was so good.
Yeah, but I think it's just in my blood. So it's natural no matter where I am to be. But no, I agree that we're like, hey, this is a show that's going to go long, get into the weeds. And for me, I love to listen to those kind of shows in other markets because, yeah, I like the 3-minute news clip when I need news. But more interesting to me is these discussions. So I think we're having a good one. I would never bring this up, this vehicle, but I love it. The discussion topic. You know, when we moved to Florida, we got the BMW i3 Rex, 70 miles of electric range with a small gas
Fantastic
backup.
car. Very
And
underrated car.
My mom still has it. She has driven up and down Florida, between Florida and North Carolina multiple times. 70-mile electric range. Nothing comes close to that anymore. Everything is far beyond that. And I spent $5 in gas in 9 months on that vehicle because it runs the engine once in a while to keep fresh. And my mom has hardly ever used the gas engine, but you can do a road trip up and down the East Coast. You can drive anywhere and not be scared. Yeah. And I think I'm a BEV enthusiast. I'm a hardcore.
Yeah, I am too.
I'm not a plug-in hybrid enthusiast, but there's a place for it. There's a market for it. And anyone who's been in the EV space for any amount of time knows that there's a large segment of people who are like just not going to get into a full EV. They need a stepping stone. They need someone to hold their hand, or they just have a situation where a plug-in hybrid or range extended electric vehicle makes more sense. Yeah. So I completely agree. This could be a big differentiator for Mazda. They could serve, it's a small brand. It's not like they need to sell 1 million a year. They just need they need a segment in the market that's theirs, that they do well, and that meets a different need than everyone's electric crossover that has 250 miles of range. Exactly. So I think it's brilliant. I think you should definitely get into a meeting with at the C-suite at Mazda and convince them to go full steam ahead with this. Right?
Do you think they've forgiven me for the 90s? They don't. They probably have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they're probably over it.
I'm not over it. I'll go to my grave going like, yeah, you're feral. I'll edit that out.
I think that's a wrap for this show.
We're done. That's it.
No, this is really I have a serious, legitimate goal. I want to make this the biggest YouTube show on EVs. There's a lot of great people do great stuff, mostly solo. Nothing beats a discussion, in my opinion. Yeah. It doesn't matter the field, doesn't matter the topic. A discussion is good, especially diversity of views and styles. I want to make this #1 EV show. Anyone who's listened this far, I hope you can support us. If you've listened this far and you don't like it, I don't know what you're doing with your life.
You've got some kind of weird mental problem, and we love you. Please come back.
Please subscribe.
If you hated this and you stuck around till the end, please. I owe you a beer. I'm in. Yeah. This is
subscribe.
You're the guy I want to talk to.
All the hate mail you want in the comments. But if you have listened to this and you're like, this could go somewhere, please spread the word. It takes a lot of work to grow something, to spread the news. A lot of times we'll do it one-on-one. Sometimes we'll bring in experts like Sandy Monroe for like a kind of talk show format.
Oh, we have so much to talk about with Sandy too. Sandy's a good dude.
Sandy's great. Yeah, we have stories too. He's a fan. So
we'll get him on. We'll email this directly to him. We'll get his comments. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Obviously, follow along on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever quality podcasts are sold. And we'll see you Tuesday.
We're gonna switch to live. So this one is pre-recorded.
We're gonna switch to live. Are you high?
We're gonna switch to live.